Hey guys, I've been messing about with ambient light following a comment that Nerd3D left on a video a couple of years ago actually. I'm actually making a video to address some problems in Poser, but I was messing about with this torch and it's old Poser 5 prop called Pirate Torch, and what it does is it's got the normal textures here, but it uses what's known as ambient light on the flame. Now, ambient light is any object which self-illuminates, and self-illumination is, say, an LCD screen. So the object actually emits light, which is why it's also known as emission. Obviously, a flame in this case, or a street light, anything like that, basically. So rather than having an invisible light in your scene, the actual object becomes a light, and it's quite a nice way to sculpt a light shape. It can create soft lighting. Anyway, I'm not going to go on about that too much. So what I have here is an infinite light over here, just so that I can see what I'm doing. Then this pirate light here, and if we go up to this pirate torch here, you'll see that it has a flame here. The flame consists of two components. It's been dumbly designed because this map is exactly the same as this map. I would have said the transparency map should be grayscale, but anyway, let's not talk about that now because it's not relevant. So what we have here is this color map plugged into the ambient color, which itself is orange, with an ambient value of 1. So that's 100% in theory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the main scene light, and I'm just going to render that. Oops, no, I'm not. Stop that. Oh, well, actually, that was Firefly, which, there's the render from Firefly. You see that torch is completely useless. So Bondware has changed the way Firefly works, which has killed a lot of your old props. We'll come back to that, but for now, let's render it in Superfly because I always prefer Superfly for better realism. So let's render that. Okay, so in this particular case, very little difference between them. Superfly is a little bit brighter. So I want this torch to illuminate the box that it's in. So normally, if you wanted to change the illumination of a light, so here's my infinite light here. What you'd do is take this value, this intensity value, and you'd increase it to 500,000, whatever you want, yeah? Excuse me. And in a similar way, what we're going to do is we're going to take this pirate torch, we're going to go to the material room, we're going to select the flame component, and we're going to increase the ambient value to 100. So it seems to me that there have been a number of changes in the way ambient works in Poser 13. I think that they keep on going back and tweaking it, and I'm not entirely sure it's for the better. But look, if I render this now, you'll see the flame looks bright and natural, and it emits light onto the box it's in, which occludes the light from going outside it. So it's doing exactly what you want. So short version is times it by 100. Now I know Heriberto is going to say, well, if you want realism, what you should be using the physical surface node. So let me just show you how we'd wire that up. So here's my maps. In fact, I don't even need that one open. I know it's going in there. So what I'm going to do, right click, new node, root node, physical surface, and then I'm going to click Superfly root. So what that means is when I render in Firefly, it uses this. When it renders in Superfly, it uses this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to recreate this wiring here, more or less. I'm going to use this material for all of them because they're the same material. So I'm going to drag first of all a color into the color area. Transparency, I hate using a full color transparency, but I can't be bothered to create grayscale. And then I'm just going to set that to 100%. So where it's black, it will be transparent. Where it's colored, it will be shades of not transparent. And actually we've got color transparency. I've never even tried that before. We'll give that a try. Okay, but this is the important thing. I want emission here. So this is the emission color, which is this bitmap. I'm going to copy exactly what they did, and I'm going to use this color. So I click on the color here to get the color picker, and I'm just going to click over onto the previous color, and that just copies that across. And I'm going to set emission strength to 100. And now, in theory, when I render that, it will now use this Superfly physical surface for rendering Superfly. And there you go. The transparency is not working properly because of the non-grayscale map. Okay, so now what happens when we go to? Oh, let me just compare those. So you'll see this physical surface is a little bit punchier than the than using the poser surface, but the poser surface transparency is better because the transparency map is more forgiving in the poser surface node. Now let's render that in Firefly. I hate using Firefly now, but I know a lot of you guys like to use it. By default, this setting will be turned off in direct light, and see what happens when I render. All you get is the emission, you get no bounce light. So to get the bounce from the indirect effect, you need to turn that indirect setting on. So we just turn indirect light on, but you're going to see something else weird now. So that little dotty red thing was a indirect pass, and you'll see that the indirect lighting in Firefly is orders of magnitude less bright. So what we have to do is we just go into the flame again, and we'll times that by 10 or even 20. So we'll just go ambient value, we'll go 1,000, and that will be, oh no, we'll go 3,000, what the heck, 3,000, and you'll see the effect of that. So it's made the flame a lot yellower, but it's also done this really blotchy kind of indirect there. So what I might do is a little cheat here. It's not indirect light, because what's happening here, just to explain, this is a 360-degree light, which basically means it's a cylinder with a bitmap on it, and then another copy of the bitmap to create the transparency. So where it's black, it's not shining, but it's shining through itself and creating this bizarre interference pattern. It's not the pattern I would have expected, but if you imagine that the light here is shining in 360 degrees, so this is shining up here, this is shining here, and they're all interfering with each other, I can only assume that this is some kind of interference pattern. It's definitely not what you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into there, and I'm going to turn that down to, let's see, no, one's too dark. Okay, let's turn that down to 100. Okay, down to 100 just to get the flame looking bright. And this is what makes me think that Bondware has messed with indirect, because all of the indirect lighting is much duller now. So now if I render that, it will be still blotchy, but not as much. And all I would do now is I'd do a cheat. And what I'd do is I'd add a point light. Let me turn my indirect light on so as I can see what I'm doing. There you go. And I'm going to do I'm going to select my point light. I'll just label that so as you know what I'm dealing with. Point. And now I'm going to do A for auxiliary, so I can see this light. And I'm going to start to bring this light into the scene, Z, so it's coming to the scene slightly above the ground. And I'm going to raise that up. Now, whenever I'm trying to position a light relative to something in the scene, it's much easier if I press F, or you probably don't have your shortcut key set up, but for F for me is my front camera. And now I can see exactly the height of that light. But before I do that, I want to show you something else. I'm just going to click Display, Object Style, Flat Shaded. So now that light is much easier to see, and I'm going to increase the scale of that so that it completely encompasses this torch. So now I'm just going to go bigger like that. There you go. And down. And now, more or less completely encompasses. I'm just going to do a top view. Uh-oh, can't see it, so I just switch to wireframe. So now what I'm doing here is to check the depth and the X and Y. Zoom in. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but I'll just move it just for, oops, daisy, just for the sake of you seeing it. There we go. So now that's on top of that, surrounding my prop inside the box. And if I do F for front, just lift it up a little tiny bit. Sometimes wireframe's the best way to work. And then back to this texture shading. So now I've got a point light that's going to emit light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the material room and I'm going to select my point light. No, I'm not. Before I do that, I'm going to select my pirate torch flame and I'm going to click here. But this time, just to explain what I did, I clicked on the color picker, but this time I went up to system color picker and I'm going to add that color to custom colors here. And now I don't need that. Now I can go back to my point light here. And now when I go to the color picker, I can again go to system color picker and it's very easy for me to apply exactly the same light color. Okay, so I don't know how bright that needs to be, but now it's behaving like a light, not an ambient object, so it's going to be different. And I'm just going to turn this infinite light off. And don't need front camera, back to main. And hopefully now, just change my perspective. Okay, when I render that, there you go. I'm getting a similar effect. So it's a different way of achieving the same thing. You really do need to leave the ambient light on to give it the torch, that brightness, which unfortunately is giving this blotchiness, but that's a way to get around the ambient problem in Firefly. So you've got three solutions there now. You've got Firefly, you've got poser poser surface and physical surface. Let me just go back in here, just so as you can see the wiring one more time on that flame. So here's my physical surface node, so that's a root node. Here's my poser surface node, that's also a root node. Now, very often I just stick with this poser surface, and I know Heriberto always says, well, why don't you use a physical surface node? And that's good advice if you can be bothered, because the physical surface node gives you physically accurate rendering according to physics. However, 99.9% of all objects in Poser are created to work with Firefly and Superfly, which means that they'll come with a material set in the Poser surface and they won't have a physical surface version. So what I always show people what they're most likely to deal with, but as I showed you today, you can rewire them and now you've got the benefits of both according to what you want to do. So hopefully you found that useful, guys, and I will speak to you again soon.